Hello, this is the second episode of What If, and the question is from Shadow of Math. What if it was still the Attitude Era for the WWE, or what if it was still going? You get the point. Um, it's a pretty difficult question because usually a company wouldn't, if they went to an era in doing something, they wouldn't keep it around for nearly a decade. I think that it would have been hard for them to continue to do the Attitude Era because what made the Attitude Era was the characters they had, like Stone Cold, The Rock, an early part of it, HBK, Triple H, the writers they had, which were like Vince Russo and Ed Ferreira. They helped create the Attitude Era. But let's just say, hypothetically, if it was to continue on past about 2001, where it ended, because it sort of pretty much ended by the invasion angle or whatever. But if it was to end, if it didn't end and they were still writing the same way and still doing the same type of segments and still doing the same type of storylines, he Shadow of Math asked, would it still be would the WWE still be as popular? And I'd probably say no, it wouldn't be as popular as it is now, because although a lot of people now say, "Oh, but the Attitude Era was great. The Attitude Era was this and that," they're sort of just nostalgic for something old. When they started watching wrestling, or a time that a lot of like their older brother or friends who watched back then watched, or what they can remember from their childhood, which would have been the Attitude Era. Now, if they would continue doing that, these same people would be saying, "Oh, but they're doing the same thing they were doing 10 years ago, or whatever." There needs to be a natural evolution in what you're doing. You can't just keep. You can't really just. You can't keep doing the same thing, because eventually you'll have fans getting bored. Because even by the end of the Attitude Era, by about 2000, 2001, ratings were going down. Ratings and bar rates, or maybe not bar rates, but it was going on a bit of a decline to what it had been, 1999 or 98, 99, maybe even 2000. But anyway, my point is, if they kept doing those same type of things, you would have seen a decline. And these same people who were talking about, or these, like, take the TNA marks, they talk about how they don't like Cena because he's been champion for a couple of years or whatever. They'd also be complaining that that WWE was still doing the same stupid crap that they were doing, in 1998 and stuff. Wrestling fans are sort of fickle like that, because you have these people who complain about John Cena being champion for such a long period of time, but like, let's say if Randy Orton was made the champion and he was to hold the belt for so long, and he was to hold it as a face, you would have those same people who criticize John Cena's wrestling, and him saying them saying that he can't wrestle and all that. They'd be saying the same thing about Randy Orton. It's just the way they are. And it would be the same thing with nearly anyone. I can remember there were people who were upset when Chris Benoit became champion, because they said, "Oh, but he doesn't have enough charisma, even though he could wrestle." Now you got John Cena, who has charisma, but can't wrestle very well. But the thing with Chris Benoit, it never really went nuts, because he didn't hold it for long. But I mean, Hulk Hogan had the same backlash John Cena has. If Stone Cold was still a champion now, and they were still doing the attitude era type of things, or The Rock was still had the championship, they'd be booing him, or just like they booed Hogan. I mean, they booed Rock anyway, because as I've said, there needs to be a natural evolution. You need to continue to change the product. You need to do something new. You can't just do the same thing for 8 or 9 years straight, and expect the fans to still buy it. It doesn't work like that. I mean, there would still be fans, but you'd find that a lot of people. You'd find that you'd still have kids coming in, getting into into the WWE like they do now. But a lot of the older fans who watch then, who still watch now, who aren't smarks. They're not a part of the internet wrestling community. They just watch because they're a WWE fan. They probably would have turned off because they'd been doing the same thing. I mean, there needs to be natural evolution, because if you don't change your product, you don't change what you're doing, people are going to get bored of it. You're going to lose fans. I mean, it's like anything. And if you still had the Attitude Era going now, you'd probably find that TNA would be right now would be doing less of an emphasis on complex storylines and run-ins, and because what they're doing is similar to what the Attitude Era was. Not just because of Vince Russell, but because they're trying to give, because that's what they think that the internet wrestling community wants. Now, if the WWF or WWE was still doing the Attitude Era type of storylines and angles and wrestling and blah blah blah, you'd find that TNA would be doing something more like, well, they'd be doing what they were doing in 2002, 2003 on their weekly pay-per-views, where it would be less emphasis on the storyline and more of an emphasis on wrestling, even though that's what they already are. I mean, they have more of an emphasis on, from what I can see, their storylines are a bit convoluted. They're trying to be too complex. Just like during the Attitude Era, some storylines were, I mean, they were childish and silly, but sometimes they got a bit too complex, but they had the time in the TV show, like they had 2 hours of Raw, so they could do that. TNA is trying to fit like all that same sort of stuff into a 1 hour TV show, but when they get 2 hours, maybe it'll be different. But as I said, it wouldn't be more. The WWF wouldn't be more. WWE wouldn't be more popular. They'd probably be less popular because times changed, obviously. And if they had kept going on like that, they probably would have developed a bad reputation. But you would have also seen, you might have, if the Attitude Era kept going, you probably wouldn't see a lot of the type of wrestlers who you're seeing now. You wouldn't have Chris Masters, and a lot of people would have completely different gimmicks to what they have now. I mean, Randy Orton wouldn't be like Legend Killer; he'd be different, and John Cena would still probably be doing the rapper, but it would just be. I mean, he's doing the Marine now, but he'd be doing the rapper, but he'd just be doing it to a more in your face type of thing. He'd be, because I mean, he would just be more offensive or whatever, but the WWE had to move away from the Attitude Era because it was giving them a bad reputation to only focusing, or for putting an emphasis on sex and violence and stuff like that. And I mean, if you watch like an episode of Raw now, they bleep out ass and bitch and shit like that. I mean, if they were to continue to try to do that, they wouldn't. Networks wouldn't back them, and they wouldn't want the programming. So they had to bring it down a notch to not only to appeal to networks and to a broader range of fans, because the Attitude Era really appealed to teenagers. But with what they're doing now, they appeal to children and adults and some teenagers. But they needed the Attitude Era to survive through the 90s, because that's what the people in the 90s wanted, because you had this cartoonish type of camp type of thing in the 80s and early 90s. So when you had the Attitude Era, it really freshened things up. But in doing that, they couldn't continue to do that because it wouldn't remain fresh. It would become the same old crap. So they had to change it to freshen things up once again. And I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years or so you're gonna have not another Attitude Era, but everything will just sort of change again. You'll have a lot of different storylines, different characters, and it'll something fresh and new to freshen up the WWF. And they don't necessarily need competition from TNA or someone to do that type of thing, but they will need to do it to keep a fan base and keep people interested in the product, just like any company would have to do. Anyway, that's about all the time I got. I'll keep sending questions and subscribe, and if you haven't seen me before, and blah blah blah. Bye. See ya.